Hi, this is Gabe from FluentForever.com. In these 3 videos, I'm going to show you the bare essentials of Dutch phonetics and spelling. If you're using one of my pronunciation trainers, don't worry about memorizing any of this stuff. The trainer will do that for you. Just watch and pay attention. Everything you see here will show up sooner or later within the trainer. I'll be going through Dutch using the International Phonetic Alphabet, or IPA. This lets us simplify our discussion a lot, since I only need to talk about 32 or so symbols, many of which you know already, instead of trying to wade through nearly 120 spelling rules. And just so that we're really accurate with our examples, I have a native speaker here, Michael, who will be helping us out.
Hi.
So, let's get started. We'll break this up into 3 parts. The first will cover the Dutch consonants, the second will cover the vowels, and the third will cover a few of Dutch's spelling rules. Now, Dutch has 25 consonants. And if you speak English, 9 of those are relatively familiar sounds and familiar symbols. 5 are going to be relatively familiar sounds with unfamiliar IPA symbols. 7 are going to be slightly modified versions of sounds you know already. And 4 are really new. We'll start with the easy ones.
There's B as in bal, D as in deur, F as in file, G as in goal, M as in mier, N as in neus, S as in slang.
And then we get into the slightly weird territory with the Dutch V and Z.
That's V as in vliegtuig, or V, and Z as in zon, or zeef.
As you can probably hear, that V sound is almost an unvoiced F.
There's not a huge difference between V and Fe.
Same thing with the Z, it's almost an unvoiced S.
There's not a huge difference between zeef and safe.
And so when you pronounce these consonants in Dutch, don't voice them very much. In fact, you can definitely get away with removing all voicing entirely.
Since many dialects of Dutch pronounce both of these words as fe and both of these words as safe.
That is to say, their V's and Z's are actually just F's and S's. We have 5 more sounds in Dutch that overlap with English, but have somewhat new IPA symbols.
The symbol, which looks like a lowercase j, is in fact y, as in Dutch's jacht, or English's yellow or yacht. Then there's ng, which looks like an elongated n and shows up in Dutch words like wang or jongen.
English uses it in words like king and sing. It's basically just an N that you make using the back of your tongue instead of the front. Note that in some dialects of English, we sometimes pair it with a G, a G sound, and so we'll say singer and finger, where in Dutch they don't generally do this.
Like in jongen, there's no g in there at all. Jongen.
That said, for foreign loanwords, Dutch will stick in a G sound,
giving you words like mango or bungalow.
Our next new symbol is known as a glottal stop, and it looks like a question mark without the dot on the bottom. It's what happens when your vocal cords come together all the way and then pop open. It makes this sound. We use it in English before words that start with a vowel, in phrases like uh-oh and it is true. In Dutch, it shows up in the middle of words, where it's used to separate one vowel from another.
Like in beambte and naapen.
You'll also hear it at the beginning of words that start with vowels.
Like in the sentence, Ome Arie eet altijd aardappels met appelmoes.
Next, we're going to cover a few sounds that we can learn by taking English sounds and then modifying them just a bit. We'll start with the Dutch L.
L as in lus.
It's a familiar symbol in IPA, a lowercase l, but it sounds a bit different from English. In English, when we say a word like link, the back and front of your tongue both come up towards the roof of your mouth. Link. But in Dutch, only the tip of your tongue will come up, and it reaches just behind your front upper teeth.
Link. English has link. Dutch, link.
So that's what the Dutch L sounds like in the beginning or middle of words. But there's actually another Dutch L.
Hul, as in mol.
This one's exactly the same as the one you'd use in English. In IPA, it's an L with a little tilde going through the center. Our next modified sounds are going to be the Dutch T, P, and K. We'll start with what looks like a T.
That's t, as in tand. If you're comparing these consonants in English and Dutch, you can say take and take. If you pay close attention, you'll notice that in English, there's a puff of air you get when you say t, t, take. And that puff of air is missing when you say the Dutch word t, t, take.
And you'll hear that same thing with the Dutch P and K.
We have p, as in paard, and k, as in kastanje.
For both of these consonants, the difference between English and Dutch is all about that puff of air.
To compare them, in English, there's pips, and in Dutch, bips, pips, bips. We can do the same for K. In English, we have ken, k, ken, and in Dutch, ken, k, ken. Next, we can talk about the Dutch sh and zh sounds.
These sound very similar to English's sh as in ship or zh as in beige, but they're made in a slightly different spot in your mouth.
We'll start with sh as in shall or ships.
To make this sound, we'll start with the English sound sh as in ships. Sh. Now, while you're making that sound, raise your tongue towards the roof of your mouth, like this. You should hear the pitch of the sound go up. Sh. And if you hear that pitch raise, you're now making the Dutch sound.
Sh. Ships. English has ships. Dutch has ships. Shall. Just like in English, you can also stick a T to this to form words like chip.
And if you voice that same high-pitched sound,
you can get zh as in jus or dj as in gin.
These two voice sounds are generally used for loan words in Dutch. Our last slightly modified sound is the Dutch H.
Ha as in hammer or hate.
This is extremely similar to the English H. The only real difference is kind of hard to hear. In Dutch, you're starting the vowel earlier, so there's a moment where you're articulating an H and a vowel at the exact same time. Practically, you're just making an extra breathy sounding vowel.
Ha. So Dutch has hate, and English has hate. Hate, hate. You can also use hint and hint. Hint, hint.
And so those are all the Dutch sounds we can make by slightly modifying English sounds. We have 4 or 5 more sounds, and these are going to be fairly new. The first is the Dutch R, which is one of the most problematic sounds in the language because different speakers pronounce it in different ways. Some speakers pronounce it in the front of their mouths,
R.
A trill that you can find in Spanish or Italian, and some speakers pronounce it in the back,
R.
that you can find in French or German. And at the ends of words, you'll sometimes hear that front R,
R.
Or you can even hear an almost American R sound.
R.
Usually this kind of variation is regional or sometimes socioeconomic, but with Dutch, it's really random. There's no good way to predict whether a speaker is going to do one or the other. In any case, I'll talk about both front and back R's just so we have them covered. And so you know, in my Dutch pronunciation trainer, my speakers tended to do back R's at the beginning of words and American-sounding R's at the ends of words. And so that's what we went with when we transcribed words into IPA for the trainer. Feel free to do the same. Just be aware that you're going to encounter speakers who do things differently, no matter what R you end up using. So, we'll start with the front R.
This is R as in ram.
It uses a familiar-looking lowercase r as its symbol, and it's known as the Trilled R. For this consonant, your tongue goes right up against your alveolar ridge. It softens a little bit to allow air to come through, and as that air comes through, it vibrates your tongue up and down against that ridge. There are a lot of tricks for producing this consonant, which you can find all over YouTube. The best one I've heard of so far for pronouncing this consonant is to think the phrase Prince of Prussia while you're saying Prince of Prussia. You're replacing those R's with D's. And then you kind of play around until your tongue starts to cooperate. Prince of Prussia, Prince of Prussia, Prince of Prussia. And this can take weeks or months. The thing can be kind of a pain to get right. If you choose to use this front R, then you're going to have the option of using it again at the ends of words.
As in boer.
But it's becoming more common to pronounce that final R in basically the same way that you pronounce it in English.
As in boer.
The IPA symbol for that sound is an upside-down lowercase r. Now, going back to that initial R, your other option here, this is to use the back R variant.
This is as in ram.
It's pronounced using the back of your tongue, which is going to pull back all the way behind where you pronounce a G.
Ga, 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 ra, ra, ra.
When all goes well when pronouncing this consonant, your uvula, that thing that hangs down at the back of your throat, will vibrate against your tongue. As always, the more familiar your ear gets with this sound, the easier it will be to produce. But that doesn't necessarily make it easy. This consonant really tripped me up when I first learned it. I basically went around gargling for a whole summer before it really started working well. If you choose to use this R, then you only have one option for the ends of your words.
And that's the American-sounding sound, as in boer.
On to our next consonant. This one looks like a capital X, but it's a few millimeters lower than it should be.
This one is ch, as in geit or chloor.
It's made in the exact same spot as that Dutch R. Your tongue raises up all the way in the back, and as that space gets smaller and smaller between your tongue and your uvula, you'll get. For many, this one tends to be a bit easier than the Dutch r sound. People seem to have an easier time kind of choking themselves with their tongue than gargling. We have one last consonant.
Dutch is v, as in wortel.
This one is a pretty uncommon sound to find in a language, but it's super interesting. It's basically a cross between a w and a v. You know how when you say a w, a w, you bring your lips together but you don't let them touch? W. And you know how when you say a v sound, you bring your bottom lip up to your upper teeth and you do let them touch? V. Well, with this sound, you're going to bring your bottom lip up towards your upper teeth, but you're not going to let them touch. That gives you a sound that has a bit of a w flavor and a bit of a v flavor and a whole lot of Dutch flavor.
V, wortel. If you want to compare Dutch to English here, you can try Dutch's win versus English's win. That's win, win. You can also try comparing Dutch's win to English's vin. Vin, vin.
And those are all of the Dutch consonants. So let's take a moment to review. We have 9 familiar sounds with familiar IPA symbols.
There's b as in bal, d as in deur, f as in file, g as in goal, m as in mier, n as in neus, s as in slang, and then v as in vliegtuig.
Which was just barely voiced in Dutch. It's almost a F.
And z as in zon.
Which was also just barely voiced. It's almost an S. We then went over some new IPA symbols with relatively familiar sounds.
J as in jacht, n as in jongen, as in beambte and naapen.
This was the sound of your vocal cords shutting and then popping open. We then went over a handful of sounds that were slightly modified versions of sounds found in English. There was the Dutch L,
as in lus,
which was made just with the front of your tongue. This is also where we introduced the symbol for the English L, which also shows up in Dutch, but just at the ends of words.
hol, as in mol.
Then there were the Dutch T, P, and K sounds.
T, as in tand. P, as in paard. And k, as in kastanje.
All 3 of these were unaspirated. That is, they didn't have big puffs of air like English does.
Then we covered sh, as in sjaal, and j, as in jus.
These started with English's sh sound, but the tongue rounded up towards the roof of your mouth even further, so the sound got a bit higher pitched.
Sh, j.
For both of these, you can also add a T or a D sound, giving you
ch, as in chip, and j, as in gin. And then we covered ha, as in hammer,
which was a voiced h sound. It's basically just an extra breathy start to your vowel.
Ha, hammer.
Finally, we covered some totally new sounds.
The rolled r, as in raam.
This one was used by some speakers in the beginning or middle of a word. When a speaker uses this R, they either use that same rolled R at the ends of words,
as in boer,
or they'll use a more American sounding R at the end,
as in boer.
Then we discussed the back R,
R, as in raam.
This one is used in the beginning or middles of words, and for speakers who use this R, they'll exclusively use the American sounding R at the ends of their words,
as in boer. After that, we discussed g, as in geit.
This was made in the same spot as that back R, just without your vocal cords engaged.
And finally, v, as in wortel.
This was made by bringing your bottom lip close to your upper teeth, but not letting the two touch. And that's it for Dutch's consonants. Next up, the vowels.